Mafia 2 is one of my favorite games of all time, so when I heard they were going to make a third game, I was beyond excited. Unfortunately, that excitement turned into a bit of skepticism when I learned that 2K Czech, the developers of Mafia 1 and 2, would not be leading development on this game. Instead, 2K would create a brand new studio, Hangar 13, to make this anticipated title, while members of 2K Czech would help with some of the development. Kotaku's Jason Schreier reported that Mafia 3 had been in development before any of this though. 2K Czech worked on their version of Mafia 3 for almost 3 years, until the project was basically rebooted and Hangar 13 took over control. This would cause some issues as Hangar 13 would use the same engine that 2K Czech created, which most of it wasn't in English. Development on Mafia 3 would last about 6 years in total and will release on October 7th, 2016 to mixed reviews from both critics and fans alike. While this game has some issues, which we'll definitely talk about, I want to start with some of the things Mafia 3 does really well. The music is fantastic. I'm sure a lot of money went into the licensing for this game, but it was worth it. The 1960s really was a great era for music, and every time I was in a car, I didn't want to get out because the music would stop. Seriously, there were numerous times where I was just chilling in a parking lot because I wanted to hear the entire song. Hangar 13 also does a great job syncing this music with certain missions. I don't want to spoil too much for those who haven't played, so here's a little clip to give you a glimpse into what I mean.
I fought the law, and the law can kiss my ass.
I fought the law, and the law lost.
As for the driving, I really enjoyed the realistic approach. I'm not gonna lie, I spent a lot of time in muscle cars, but they all felt authentic. The car was awful in the rain, I would get stuck going up various hills, in the mud, I would just drift a lot, especially when making tight turns. It was realistic. In Mafia 3, you can also switch between various camera angles, but unfortunately there isn't a camera directly behind the wheel, which would have been nice to see. I also noticed one of the camera angles just didn't look that good if you had a supercharger. It was sort of like a low texture and they didn't realize that. So if you don't like the look of that, you can obviously change the camera angle, but you can also go to the mechanic, swap out your supercharger, or just not use one at all. The vehicle customization in general is actually pretty detailed. Obviously, it's not like Forza or Need for Speed, but you can change a decent amount of things. This feature wasn't even at launch, so thankfully 2K added it in, even though it should have been there from the start. Now, the most praiseworthy thing about this game, and I think everyone can agree on, is some of the cutscenes. This game released in 2016 and has some of the best cutscenes I've ever seen. Graphically, it's some of the best, but the motion capture just makes it that much more real. On top of that, there's cutscenes that are meant to look like real footage from the 60s, and it just immerses you more into the world. The voice actors deserve praise as well. All of them were top-notch, and none of them ever brought me out of the experience. It's also pretty crazy considering a lot of them aren't that well known, so again, props to everyone there. And this leads me into the story. I really enjoyed the way this story was told through a documentary style. Your friend Donovan would be in a courtroom explaining how you perform certain tasks, and then you would go and do that. Father James would get more insight into Lincoln's past and sort of how he got into the current situation, which makes for some interesting backstory. These two are definitely the standout characters, but there's other great ones as well. The main bad guy, Sal Marcano, felt like an actual threat because he was smart. Even though you keep getting in his way, he doesn't rush out and make stupid calls. He always looks at different options despite nothing going according to plan. I also really have to praise the game of its depiction of racism. It never shied away from it. There are shops that literally won't serve you because of the color of your skin. People call you racist slurs. Cops actually respond based on where you're located. If you're in an area with mostly black people, they will take their time and not come right away. It's honestly disgusting, but that's what it was like back in the 60s. So again, Hangar 13 deserved credit for not taking the easy way out. With that said, I kind of want to expand on the open world aspect of this game. As I just mentioned, there's some realistic approaches like stores not serving you and the cops' response time. But other than that, I felt like this city was just kind of bland. The NPCs don't really feel alive, especially when compared to other games like GTA, Red Dead, Watch Dogs, or Mafia 2. Actually, in most cases, these NPCs want to die. There was so many times when I was driving, and for whatever reason, NPCs decided to jump right in front of my car, so they didn't want to be in this game either. No, but seriously, New Bordeaux has its moments. There can be some really nice lighting when the sun is rising. At night, some of the neon signs will stand out. It's not a bad looking game, which I've seen some people say. There are some NPCs though that just look hideous, and you'll see that a few times, but it doesn't take you out of the experience. Now, there are some actual gameplay elements of the open world that I just can't stand. For example, you can't drive through bushes. They're made out of fucking rock. Hangar 13 really want you to stay on the road. If you try to take a shortcut, it will end up taking a lot longer because you can't drive through these little tiny bushes. Also, during this story, you'll unlock a ton of hideouts for each district, and some of these buildings are really cool, and you can tell a lot of work went into them. But with that said, there's absolutely no reason to ever visit them again. Once you claim that area, you'll most likely never step foot in the same place again. Regardless of that though, the missions to unlock these are some of the worst things I've ever had to do. The game is an actual grind. You'll talk to Donovan or one of your lieutenants, they'll give you 2 contacts. Both of these contacts will make you go to various locations to take out an enemy or blow up supplies. Rinse and repeat until you finally attract an enemy who is barely connected to Sal Marcano. Once you attract them, they'll most likely go to a place you've already visited and you have to take them out. This is what you'll be doing the majority of the game. There is literally no variety in any of these missions. They're boring and uninspired open world tasks that are in the way of the actual story missions. I know this opinion may upset some people, but I truly think this game didn't have to be open worlds. The entire time I was playing through this game, I just wanted to do the actual story missions. The open world just feels like it's there to drag out the game, and there's not even a fast travel option. I feel like the budget could have been better spent if they just focused on these bigger missions instead. Because honestly, these story missions for the most part are really well done. There's variety, great music, and an actual story that's being told. While we're talking about negatives, I also have to bring up the amount of bugs that I encountered. There were missions that wouldn't start because I couldn't talk to a person. There were missions that wouldn't proceed because my NPC friend was stuck in a door and just would not perform a certain action because of it. I could see the actual name of cutscene files. Some cutscenes would literally be on repeat and never end unless I closed the game. These are issues that I came across in the past week. Hangar 13 never fixed any of them, at least on PC. This honestly probably annoyed me even more than the repetitive missions because it's just disappointing to see so many issues that are never going to get fixed. The last thing I want to talk about is the narrative. I mentioned earlier how I liked how the story was structured, and I honestly think it's a good story. But there are some issues with it that I just happen to notice. First off, this story is very similar to The Punisher. The main protagonists both served in the military, they both drive muscle cars, they lost their loved ones to a mob, they have a friend who gives them intel on enemies, and they're literally out for revenge, but still have a code where they don't kill children or women. Thankfully, there's some interesting characters you'll meet, and the documentary style does change it up, because the core story is something we've seen before. And to be honest, I didn't think this was a good Mafia story. And what I mean by that is Lincoln Clay is never really attached to them. The Mafia is never the focus, and it seems like they're just kind of thrown in. especially Vito Scaletta. Don't get me wrong, it was nice to see Vito again, but when I think about his character in Mafia 3, he's useless. He basically puts all of his money into a heist at the start of the game and gets betrayed. Like, come on. Vito would have never done that, especially since he never liked Sal to begin with. After that, he relies on you to give him districts. Think about it. If you never played Mafia 2 and went straight into this game, Vito is a forgettable character, just like Burke and Cassandra. They don't add anything to this game. At the end of the day, Mafia 3 was a disappointment. I don't think it's a bad game. The game has some good things going for it, but it's just not enough, especially for a Mafia game, a AAA game. It just missed the mark. I honestly want this series to keep going, so hopefully if they make a fourth one, they learn from their past mistakes and make the best possible game for the fans.